Hello, Watch Forest Focus. It won't be lost on any Nottingham Forest fan that the South American market is becoming increasingly more important to the club. So with that in mind, it's great to welcome an expert voice today in the Copa Club's Nathan Joyce, who also happens to be a Forest fan. Nathan, good to have you with us. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well. Before we jumped on the podcast, I was telling you how busy I was with the transfer rumours and Copa America and everything in between. And of course, Forest being linked with South Americans is always fun, but a busy time. But yeah, I'm doing good. I'm coping just for now.
Well, it's very good to have you with us. You'll be familiar to a few Forest fans today through Twitter. You've been on Forest podcast before. You've been on Red Side of the Trent, and you touted Murillo back then, I think. So you'll be known to quite a few. But just tell us a little bit about yourself and your work around the Copa Club and your Forest story as well, whether that's a family thing or something that you've latched onto yourself. Just tell us a bit about yourself before we get going.
Yeah, Forest fan since around the age of 10. So you could say a little bit of a late bloomer. So I grew up in rural Lincolnshire, and the closest stadium to me was the City Ground. And my granddad was actually a West Brom fan, and Forest playing West Brom in the FA Cup. I think it was the season they got relegated, but we went, and it was the first game I actually experienced a 1-0 win. And I was like, wow, like a little bit of this. And then it pretty much has been downhill ever since until recent years. I'm still trying to get my head around Forest being back in the Premier League, and especially signing all these South American players who have been watching in their respective leagues. So I almost fell into watching South American football towards the in and around uni. And then my first sort of jobs in sport was night shifts, where I found myself watching South American football almost as an escape from Forest really at the time, because when we were winning no more than 6 or 7 games this season, it was, as you know, it's been a hard watch in recent years. So I got myself immersed in South American football, and it just sort of snowballed from there really. And yeah, I didn't really have a big social media following until the last year and a half, really. It was when Forest first signed Danilo and Scarpa, and I think I got a bit of interest from initial articles and put 2 and 2 together and thought, look, I've got a great concept here. I'm not putting my knowledge to good use, really, and people don't know about these players and the way in which more players are coming across to European leagues and especially the Premier League. People want to know about them. So to find a gap in football is quite hard in 2024. So yeah, launched the Copa Club, which is, for people who don't know, a platform, whether it's website, podcast, or physical magazines. Believe it or not, people still love collecting those. So we put together player profiles, interview people such as sporting directors from football clubs, football players as well, and just try to shed more light on a part of the world which people don't know about, but football, which is sort of in people's blood. Like, it's stripped away from the money side of things and it's just raw. And I've always liked that part of it. But nowadays, all these players are getting cherry picked and people want to know who they are. And I'm the guy who's watching them till stupid o'clock in the morning. So, you know, you're at least getting someone. Maybe I'm not a professional scout or anything like that, but at least you're hearing from somebody who's actively watched them away from YouTube compilations. So yeah, that's sort of my backstory.
Excellent. I've come to hate YouTube compilations because I get suckered into them. I think they're actually not damaging. That's giving them going way over the top. But I think we read way too much into them. So it's great to have you doing that. Just before we get into proper questions, obviously we're a podcast. You're a podcast. How often can people find you a week? I guess more so during the season, or maybe more so now because you're so busy. But is it once a week, twice a week on YouTube and audio platforms?
We try to do consistently 2 podcasts a month, so bi-weekly, with a couple of my good co-hosts in Callum Goodall and Peter Pankowski, both South American experts as well, where we'll be, throughout the year, we talk about domestic football and players to keep an eye on and profiles and all that in between. But at the moment, we're doing as many sort of reactionary videos to good transfer links. We're not jumping on them being clickbaity. We're just there to provide our opinion on player profiles, positives and negatives. And yeah, I don't know how many we're going to be doing over the next couple of months, but we'll be dropping them across Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. So whatever platform you prefer, sign up, and we will be sporadically dropping, hopefully, a fair few episodes across the next couple of months.
Excellent. Well, Nathan put a list on Twitter of some players that Forest might look at. So I picked out a few from that, mostly for fun, but also interesting. Some of the names are really interesting. Some we know already. But we'll get to those as we go along. We'll also talk about the players that are at Forest currently from Brazil. But just in general, before that, Nathan, the South American market feels like the emerging market in certainly Premier League football, it used to be like, it felt to me like players would go to France or Holland, and then we'd sign them in this country for a lot more money. What's behind the emergence of South American transfers to this country, do you think, so much?
I think there's a few factors. If I bullet point them, I think Brexit has had an influence. Around 6-7 months after that, in 2021, the rules around work permits were really relaxed. Before, like, clubs didn't even try or bother, just because they were so complex. There were so many, like, players had to have certain caps for national team and appearances in domestic competitions and stuff, where obviously if you're looking to sign 16, 17, 18-year-olds, which is happening now from the Premier League, South America to the Premier League, players don't have any appearances. So there was no chance that you could even do that. And the fact that the amount of money which is in the Premier League is probably the most obvious shout, in terms of, if you at the end of every transfer window, there's a wrap up, isn't there, comparing the Premier League to the likes of La Liga and like Ligue 1 and like Portugal League and stuff. And it's Premier League's out there on its own. So I think the fact that the Premier League can just offer so much more from a wage package and away from a lifestyle and stuff. And it's now football clubs like Forest, which are building sort of like little contingencies, communities of these South American players. It's easier to come across rather than just one on their own. I think we get a little bit lost sometimes in terms of watching the player on the pitch, whether they play half an hour, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, whatever, and going, whether they've come across, Nathan's been hyping this player for ages and he's not performed. Well, they're still human. They're moving to a new culture, a new climate, new language. And that's 99% of like what is affecting them away from the pitch. And on the pitch is pretty much 1% of their life. So it's a case of adjusting to that in a way. And before, we've seen the transitions to La Liga and Portugal, because obviously the language, the weather, the culture is very similar. But with the rules relaxing with work permits and the fact that a Premier League club can go and say £60,000 a week instead of 30,000, like, players are coming from poor backgrounds, rather, from Brazil, Argentina, Ecuador, etc. So it's a case of pretty much going, look, I can set my family up and myself for life when I've come from an unprivileged background. So those are all the really sort of obvious factors, but they're all the ones which are true. So money, the rules relaxing around work permits, it's made it easier for the clubs to go and cherry pick the best players. But these players also want to financially benefit from themselves as well. And don't get me wrong, they're almost brought up now with everyone talking about the Premier League more than, I guess, La Liga. Okay, it's the best league in the world, if you want to phrase it that way, depending on your preference. And so these players are being brought up now, video games, etc., and the dizzy highlights and the most marketed league in the world. That's pretty much which is forced down their throat as well. So you've got to think about it from a marketing angle for these young lads who are coming across. So everything sort of like the Premier League is the be all and end all at the end, where that used to be probably La Liga within the last 10 years, but that's not really happening anymore. And the fact that there's so many players coming across to, do I dare say, smaller Premier League clubs, which are from all sides of the world, where that didn't normally really happen. It would go to a Man United or a Liverpool, for example, and it'd only be one or two. Now players are now seeing groups together, and I think that's making it a lot more inviting. Forest obviously had a quite big African and South American community last season, and they're looking to build on that, which is great. And I think if you can go there where there's 4 or 5 players from your region or can speak your language, you're going to settle into the environment and the club a lot easier.
Do you think these players are generally underpriced as well? We'll get into specifics, but like Murillo for 12 million, there's obviously a big element of risk, but generally you can still find real bargains in South America, even if more clubs are getting tuned into it now.
Yeah, exactly. Like Corinthians are in a bad place financially at the moment and need to raise sales, and people know that. And you think about that when that happens in Europe, a player who's worth 50 million will go for 30 million. And so when it comes to Corinthians, who are desperate just to balance the books at the moment, and there's a lot of political stuff going on between ownership, which has changed over the last 12, 18 months, which comes into play. And there's not much money in these countries as well. Well, I've recently spent some time in Argentina, and the inflation rate which is going on there, but like the stuff is crazy. You'd walk down the street and it was easier, or people like the common man or woman on the street would be doing like a transaction with a random guy for money exchange rather than going to the bank. The banks were empty. So if you think about that, that's what's going on in people's day-to-day lives. Think about what's happening from a football club's perspective. And it's only recently in the last 2 or 3 years in Brazil that they've changed the laws so that a Brazilian club can be owned by sort of like a US owner or a Saudi owner, where we've obviously had that in the Premier League for a long time now. That's only just started to filter through with Brazil, and a few clubs have just been taken over. The most obvious one people might recognise is John Textor, Crystal Palace, maybe going to Everton at the moment. He owns Botafogo, and he's started to invest a lot of money in them, and that's obvious now because they're competing for titles and one of the better teams now in Brazil. Argentina have just about changed the rules for that, but fans are very much hesitant that they want to become sort of a corporation because it's sort of built in their culture, football, and having spent time out there, it's people live and breathe it. It's very much it's a way of life. And I know English fans may sort of argue the case and say that they're very much that case, but it's completely different out there. But the fact that with the inflation rates and everything which is going on, and like that filters down to the football clubs as well, and not having that investment in place when these players are valued, when, for example, Valentin Barca went across to Brighton, 10, 12 million, like Boca weren't happy about it, but it's money they simply couldn't turn down. And it was the same with Corinthians and Murillo. I'm still surprised that Murillo came across the Nottingham Forest. Whoever's sanctioned that transfer and done the groundwork to get him across, like, fair play to them. I'm not 100% sure who that was, but I never spoke too much about Murillo and anything to do with Forest, and same with Danilo, because I just never thought that would happen, to be honest with you. I always thought he was destined for much bigger things, and I think that's going to be the case whether it's this transfer window or not. So yeah, if we go back to the fees, I think you've got to look about the climate in the country and like the complications around that as well. And there's loads of fiddly factors. I've touched on it on a very surface level because there's a lot of complexities, which is probably not for this particular podcast, but it does impact and it does affect like the prices. So it's a bit bittersweet for me. I think the players are going across earlier and earlier, and look, players like Murillo have proven that it can work. But like, if I touch upon Esteval, who's going to Chelsea and signing when he was 16, 17, yes, there's rules in place that they have to be 18 to go across, but he's been with like Palmeiras since he was like 10, 11, and the clubs don't even really get to see who they've developed over the last decade from when they've come in from academies, because Nottingham Forest are guilty of it as well in a way. Wolves, Brighton, and there's two ways of looking at it. I'm throwing it in a negative way because I'm a South American fan and I like to see these players develop, and the fact that they're going across earlier and earlier, I think it is a cause for concern. But then I have to give praise to clubs like Nottingham Forest, Wolves, Brighton, because they almost have to go direct to the source because they can't wait for them to develop. Imagine if Murillo went somewhere else, Forest wouldn't be able to pay 60, 70 million for him, but they need that money to be able to balance the books, as we've all seen and witnessed over the last year in terms of point deduction and stuff. So for a club to be sustainable, they almost have to follow that, as cliche as it is, the Brighton model. Okay, I don't think Brighton do anything too fancy, to be honest with you, but they were just the first there and first to be clever. There's so many players there across Argentina, Ecuador, in particular Brazil is the strongest league by far because there's money in it for teams like Nottingham Forest to have a look and dip their toes into the market and not have to put a ridiculous amount of money across. I know we'll get onto it later, but Joe Worrell looks like he's going to be potentially moving out of the club for 3, 4, 5 million, and Vital, who's got Champions League, Europa League experience, played high level in Brazil, Libertadores, etc., 3-4 million as well. I mean, it's ridiculous that if that was an English player, it'd probably be 15, 20 million. So like the club has to be sensible and look at these fees as well. But I think it depends on which side you look at on. I can see why South American fans and clubs would be annoyed, but at the end of the day, like, they also need the money to be able to be sustainable because they don't have that huge Premier League funding. They don't have that backing. They don't have like a huge company behind them or a Marinakis. So it's stripping it back, and it depends which way you look at it. Maybe I'm on the fence. Yes, I am a Forest fan, but I really respect and love South American culture and football. So it's an interesting one.
Just before we pick up on, we'll come to Vital, but we'll come to Murillo first. But just before that, if you haven't already, you can get your live show tickets. This is basically the last shout. It's tomorrow with Lewis is on the panel with Gary, and then Greg and probably Emily at the Trent Navigation. Obviously, 7 p.m. kickoff, and £1 from each ticket will go to charity. So I think the weather forecast is all right. Great to see as many people as possible at the Nav tomorrow. Get your tickets from the link in the description to this episode. On Murillo, then, like I say, you were a fan of his before he signed for us. Were you surprised by how well he's done, or just listening to you talk there, did you think he'd do as well as he has done?
I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but I went.
I've set you up there, haven't
Yeah, I know. I did say on the red side of the Trent podcast that a top 4, top 6 side would probably be looking at him by the end of the season if he was to be integrated into the squad. And BBC Nottingham as well came and spoke to me, and I was probably even more swept up when I spoke to them. And I did say, look, Champions League within a year or two is possible for him. Obviously, Champions League is not going to be with Nottingham Forest, sadly, a few years away from anything like that. But he had experience. I think a lot of people were looking at his numbers going, oh, he's only played 25, 26 games, senior level. Now, under 20s, he was bossing it, to be honest with you. And his profile really stood out. And look, youth football here is taken seriously, but nowhere near as it is compared to Brazil. Under 20 football in Brazil is highly regarded. Thousands of fans will go to certain games, especially cup finals. And it's a way of for Corinthians to test players at a good level before integrating into the senior team. There's not a huge step up, say, from a player coming in, an 18-year-old at Nottingham Forest Academy, going from that sort of level of football to the Premier League is a massive jump. Where in Brazil, under 20s is as physical. You have to be technical. You have to be really good on the ball, in all positions, okay, before progressing to the senior level. And Corinthians, one of the best academies in Brazil, they just keep churning out so many players. Gabriel Moscardo, who's moving across to PSG, another example of that in the recent window. So there's so much talent there. And Murillo just sort of stepped forward and bossed it for Corinthians. He did exactly what he did for the under-20s in the senior football. And it was so obvious, maybe because I was a closer eye to it, but I was told about this guy in under 20 level. So I started watching Corinthians a little bit closer at that level. I've always got an eye on them, really, because of how good their academy has been over the past 5-6 years, probably even longer, to be honest with you. But his transition to senior football was seamless, and it was always going to make that step up if he could adjust to life in England. I think I touched upon right at the beginning of this podcast. There's so many other factors which go into these players coming across: language, weather, culture, etc. But when he came across, I was very much wrapping him in cotton wool to be let's not hound him if he doesn't settle in straight away, because there's a real prospect here. And I can't remember his debut, who it was, but he got thrown in, and I think it surprised quite a lot of people, and even me, because he didn't really play for the first 3 weeks. And everyone's like, Forrest having all these defensive issues, why are we not trying him out? And I was like, let's just ease him in. He's probably still adjusting. And then Cooper threw him into a game at home, and I can't remember who it was, but straight from the first whistle.
It might have been Brentford, I think.
Might have been Brentford.
Sixth game of the season. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, I couldn't remember. Sorry. But he made an impact straight away, and ever since, it was just seamless. There was never really any occasions where he looked nervous, and I think you can just recognize people from Brazil. Like I said, I'm no scout, but you can see a player's mentality when they've moved across to the senior level and they've started getting regular minutes. And for me, that is such an important factor which needs to be considered when these players come across. Yes, they may have technical ability, but if they don't have leadership skills, a strong mentality to fight and win for the ball, and trust in their instinct. And we saw against Crystal Palace, Murillo just danced through those players and almost scored probably goal of the season. But we've seen that time and time again for Corinthians as well. I drew a comparison to Sergio Ramos, because that was the only other centre-back I could think of who would play that or dare even move in that way up the pitch. And obviously that can sometimes leave him exposed at the back. And it was reined a little bit in when he first progressed to senior football with Corinthians, rather than under 20s, where he could take those more calculated risks, so to speak. But it's been no surprise to me whatsoever, and it's been wonderful to watch, to be honest with you, because not just from my point of view, because I was shouting about him to begin with. I'm not the one who scouted him, but I was just so excited to see him in a Forest shirt. I never thought that would happen. And the fact that we've been blessed with 12 months of him and he's settled into it, I almost look at it, I try to put my Forest sort of point of view to one side and look at it from his point of view as to whether it's best for him to progress, or that the fact that he's come across to English shores and it's worked out for him, and other clubs are now looking at him for potentially progressing to the top 4, or I know Real Madrid, Barcelona names are thrown in. I'm not sure if that's just clickbait, but what a wonderful season he's had. And he's just done exactly what he's done for Corinthians in England, hasn't changed his game, hasn't overthought the situation. And he's probably the best signing in my lifetime. And there's probably not too much to shout about over the last 30 years or so. But just a wonderful talent, and I'm so pleased for him and the fact that he's settled in at Forest. And I think again, having players like Danilo with him and all that, that's really helped him settle in. And like without him, there's without a doubt Forest would have been relegated this season. I'm sure of it. Look how he was in that Sheffield United game towards the end of the season when that win was so critical. But his highlight reel was probably more impressive than the highlights for the game itself. And that's not me taking anything away from Hudson-Odoi, but it was just for any young player wanting to come up through the ranks and knowing how to defend. I just think Murillo is just the perfect example of a modern centre-back. And yes, you could argue aerially he may need to improve from set pieces, but he's not alone in that. But his reading of his game and his positioning is he's up there with the very best, which is why his game will take him to the next level, whether that's this transfer window or the next. It'll be interesting to see exactly what happens with him in this particular window. I'd love for him to stay. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes. Maybe the fee may rule a lot of clubs out, but you can't blame Forest for asking for 60, 70 million plus. And they almost deserve that in a way because, again, Forest were brave enough to go to the source and give a young player with not much for senior football an opportunity. But they've obviously seen something which I did as well. And I'm so glad that it's happened for at least the last 12 months. And long may it continue. Let's have at least another season of Murillo, and hopefully Forest can enjoy a season away from a relegation scrap.
Is he, I don't want to make sweeping generalizations about Brazilian players, but is he an outlier culturally in the way he plays the game? Are all young Brazilian defenders bred to play that way, to be that buccaneering, or is he sort of one of a kind in the way he plays?
I'd steer more to one of a kind. I haven't seen a good centre back at that age in a very long time. Obviously, because I made quite a bit of noise about him and praised him at the end of the season. A lot of people on Twitter were like, "Nathan, who's the next one? Find us the next one." And unfortunately, I only have a negative answer and an answer people don't want to hear because there isn't one coming through at the moment. To be honest with you, Brazilian centre-backs coming through, they're always taught to play from like on the ground, but the way in which Murillo sort of runs through people, bursts up the pitch, has that confidence, has that swagger, that calmness, all these elements. Obviously, every centre-back wants to have that. And it's just a one of a kind, to be honest with you. He just stood out. There are technically capable players in Brazil at the moment, and we'll probably talk about Vital a little bit later on, and he probably falls into that bracket, but he's nowhere near on the same wavelength as Murillo because he's 24. He would have been picked up by now. So the fact that Forest moved quickly to pick him up, which is why I'm throwing so much praise his way and the way the club snapped him up, to be honest with you, because if they'd waited another 6 months, I mean, he would have been at a top 4, top 6 side because he would have showcased what he did for Forest, but Corinthians, and someone would have taken a chance on him, whether even that was Porto or Benfica, who love to dive into that market, and they're the perfect teams we speak about the Brighton model, but the Benfica and the Porto model never really get spoken about, and they're experts in approaching South American football. So yeah, a complete one-off, to be honest with you. I've not seen anything quite like him in terms of his ability and the high ceiling, which was so evident to see if you watched him for Corinthians at any level, to be honest with you. So yeah, unfortunately, Forest fans who are listening to this, there isn't another Murillo waiting for Forest just to pluck them out of thin air. They don't grow on trees, sadly.
I guess the fact we've hired Benfica's chief scout as well is a good thing because he'll be an expert in this market. So again, one we can really push into even more as well, I would say. Yeah, is there anything you want to say on that? Do you expect that we'll even pursue the South American market even more now with him in?
You'd like to think so, wouldn't you? It makes a lot of sense. And if you look at the deals he's made over the last few years, it will get Forest fans very excited. He was responsible for the Marcos Leonardo deal to take him to Benfica. For people who don't know who he is a striker from Santos. Santos, again, another huge club in Brazil. Yes, they were relegated for the first time in history last year, but they've produced some wonderful players over the years. And Marcos Leonardo, he had about, I can't remember exactly, so don't quote me on this, but he had about the same amount of goals as Vitor Roque, who signed for Barcelona, and his team were competing for a Libertadores spot where Santos were awful. They didn't create anything, and Marcos Leonardo still finished with 13, 14 goals, and I think he moved across for around 20, 25 million, which is ridiculous, and he's transitioned really well to Benfica. But I believe that the scout who's moved across to Nottingham Forest. I can't remember his name, apologies, but he was responsible for the Marcos Leonardo deal. So if you go through his profile and look who he's brought in, I think someone flagged it to me on Twitter. I can't give him any credit, but I knew he was responsible for that particular deal. And I was a huge advocate for when I found out he was available. I mean, it almost sounds a little bit ridiculous when I put names forward for Forest to sign, but the fact that Forest are diving into that market, it doesn't anymore. And when I see a player like that, and Forest have been crying out for a striker, really, in terms of, yes, Chris Wood really stepped up last season and surprised a lot of people when Awoniyi was injured. But Awoniyi seems to be made of glass, to be honest with you. And getting a full season out of him is going to prove difficult. And so Forest do need another option and another striker. And again, Leonardo's don't grow on trees, but if anyone's got an eye on Brazilian football, it doesn't take a genius to work out that he had the ability to step up into European football. And Benfica will probably sell him for a huge profit once again. So look, only positive that Forest have brought him in. And hopefully he has a say in, or at least a look on to future transfers in and around the club.
Pedro Ferreira it is. I had to Google him myself, I must admit.
That's the one. Yeah, sorry, the name evaded me for a second.
Oh, no, me too, don't worry. Just briefly, before we go on to a few potential signings, the players we have and one we have had at Forest. Danilo, first of all. What was he like in it was Palmeiras, wasn't it? Was he the kind of player we see at Forest? Was he more defensively minded? And how do you think he might evolve for Forest in the next year or two based on what you've seen of him before he signed here?
It's really funny because he was an out number 6 defensive midfielder, to be honest with you. I think he had 1 goal in 2 years to his name, and that was a header in the Libertadores from a corner, which we haven't seen at Forest, but we haven't seen many goals from corners, have we? But he was very much a number 6, but he did have that skill set where when he won the ball, he had that trickery. He was wanting to progress up the pitch, but he played in a very rigid 4-2-3-1 for Palmeiras under Abel Ferreira, a really highly rated Portuguese manager who's been out there a while. Won lots of trophies with them. Danilo came with his trophy cabinet full, to be honest with you, pretty much playing in that role. But Ferreira's been, there's been a lot of attention on Palmeiras because of Esteval going to Chelsea, Luis Guilherme, who's just been signed for West Ham, Endrick to Real Madrid. And so he's got a lot of attacking talent there, but he's very much pigeonholed them into certain areas and not fulfilled their talent, really, to be honest with you. And maybe that was the same with Danilo, because the way in which he blossomed and took off in his first season in that more advanced role, I could probably see it from his skill set, but I would never have predicted that he would have scored 3 or 4 goals, which effectively kept Forest up in a way. And we haven't really seen it as much over the last year. I did like him in that sort of free number 8 role, so to speak. I guess him, Morgan Gibbs-White, sort of venturing into the other half. I mean, I'm not one to get bogged down into stats, but before I jumped into this podcast, the way in which his ball retrieving in the final third was so much higher last season. Well, the first season we signed him, in that last 12 games he played, compared to last year when he was a bit more restricted in his play, and maybe under Nuno and Cooper to an extent. So it's interesting with him. It's all about consistently playing Danilo. Obviously, he came up from an injury, and then fans are very much sit on the fence with Danilo, and I'm very quick to sort of jump and defend him. I think if you play him consistently, but I think if you need to advance him slightly higher up the pitch, to be honest with you, I think that's where he's more effective. He can offer goals, assists. He can switch off a little bit in that defensive midfield role, which you can't get away with in the Premier League, where he could in Brazil. But I feel like in that more number 8 role and that flexibility to venture into the final third and help out with wingers or the striker who has played on that occasion is where we see the best of him. So, yeah, I didn't really anticipate it, to be honest with you, because Abel Ferreira very much kept him in that defensive midfield role, and he always looked to beat a man, and he had that skill set within him. But he was very much pigeonholed to not progress. So we never really got to see him unlock his full potential. So he had a good couple of seasons at Palmeiras before moving across, won all these trophies and had the ability. Arsenal wanted to sign him. Arsenal apparently were interested again in the summer, or last summer. So it goes to show, like, he is highly regarded, and he probably won't finish his career at Nottingham Forest, but I don't think many people would expect that either. But hopefully, if he doesn't get injured next season, if he does adopt that high role at the pitch, I think he probably will be on the move again in 12 months, because we only saw a glimpse when he first came across. But I think he played 12, 13 games in that first season. And I remember Cooper randomly dropping him, and maybe it wasn't random, but it seemed random, outside in, dropped him for 3 or 4 games, and Forest didn't pick up a single point, and then brought him back in the team. And Forest really excelled. He built up a nice relationship with Gibbs White, and like I said, his 3 or 4 goals, I think it was 3, effectively kept Forest up, and just offered Forest another dimension, because that first season in the Premier League, Forest under Cooper were very deep looking for that counter attack, but there was still a huge gap between striker and midfield. And the way Danilo came in to be able to support Gibbs White, so he didn't have to do it all on his own, he did it effectively. So he's a versatile player, but I'd like to see him sit in one particular position, like that number 8 role, and sort of really make that his own. And I think that's when that will take him to the next level, rather than, well, some games he gets 20 minutes there, then he starts as a number 6. I don't feel that's really going to help his development, to be honest with you. But look, I'm not the manager, but if I was, that's exactly where I'll be putting Danilo going forward.
What about Scarpa then? He's we have players like Carvalho and Sangare at the moment who divide opinion. Scarpa, some people are really upset he didn't play more. Some people feel his physical profile wasn't up to the Premier League. What do you make of his time in England? Do you feel he was unfortunate, or was it always going to work out like that for him at Forest?
I'll address first of all that physical profile. I hate that when players come across. I absolutely hate that, because look at Brennan Johnson and what a wonderful footballer he was for us, and obviously the amount of goals he scored in the Premier League. But I mean, look at his physical profile, but no one ever questioned that. And Gustavo Scarpa was probably stronger than him, but because he's come across from South America, it's the first thing we need to address. Can he handle the physicality of the Premier League? I mean, Brazil's not a soft league. So I just wanted to vent a little bit there about that, to be honest with you, because it's the question I get asked all the time, and I hate it, to be honest with you. I don't think it was a real concern of mine. Scarpa was a funny one. I did speak to Daniel Taylor for the Copa Club about this, and he did say that Marinakis originally signed him for Olympiacos. He had no intentions of coming to Forest. Marinakis loves a number 10, James Rodriguez, João Carvalho, those sort of players. And Scarpa was meant to be coming across. His contract was finished at Palmeiras. He always said he wanted to play European football. He'd won everything in Brazil, from personal trophies all the way up to Libertadores titles, etc. So I think he felt like in his last sort of peak years, he wanted to come and test himself. And then Daniel Taylor told me 24, 48 hours before his medical, whilst I think he may have even been in Greece, that he was actually being shipped across to Nottingham Forest, because Forest had a lot of injuries, if you remember, in that first season. So he was almost plucked and brought across, and no one particularly knew about that. So I think everyone was like, oh, Forest going back into the Brazilian market. But if I'm led to be true from what Daniel Taylor told me, he was never part of the plan. And so if he's not part of the plan, and Steve Cooper turns up and there's a random Brazilian sat there who obviously I don't think he's ever probably watched Gustavo Scarpa before, and then trying to integrate him into the team while he was still trying to fit in Brennan Johnson, Jesse Lingard without a striker. And if you think about those months when Scarpa came in, there were so many injuries. He was almost forced into that left wing role, which meant that he needed to help out the left back, a role which he's never played before in his career. So imagine taking one of the best players from Nottingham Forest and moving them across to Brazil, and then all of a sudden saying, oh, by the way, you have to do defensive work rather than operating in the final third like you normally do. It wouldn't have a good success rate. And the same happened with Scarpa. During that period, Forest were awful, almost looked like they were going to be relegated. And Scarpa was having to do a job that he wasn't responsible for when Forest didn't have a striker either, really, because we almost played Gibbs White in that role, I believe, if my memory serves me well. So he didn't get a fair chance. And then, look, he had so many off-field problems as well in terms of the whole cryptocurrency scandal. I think at the time, his wife/girlfriend had recently given birth. So he had a son or daughter, I can't remember, to a young baby we'll go with, to contend with. There was a lot going in. And then obviously, look, a settling in period from living in Sao Paulo to moving across to Nottingham during those winter months as well is a huge reality check. And I think his second game was Blackpool away in the FA Cup, and I think he was the only person, or the only player rather, to come out of that game with any sort of credit, even though we got pumped. I think Ryan Yates scored right at the end, but I think, what was it, 4-5, something ridiculous. But we saw glimpses, didn't we? That first game against Southampton, which was his debut when he came on for 20 minutes, was what we saw in Brazil time and time again. Lovely left foot, perfect touch, set pieces, being able to switch the play, all of these factors. Do you know what? If we'd signed him this season, would he have settled in better, like with an actual structured team, less injuries? A lot of pressure was on Steve Cooper to continuously deliver points, obviously, but he sort of leaned on players who he trusted. I don't think, obviously, Scarpa, he did trust. He obviously didn't care that he went back to Brazil to sort out this cryptocurrency. That would never have happened if it was Gibbs White asking for time off or anything like that. So there was just a lot of circumstances which didn't work out for him. And then he did go into, he obviously moved across to Olympiacos, which was the original plan, and didn't really settle in there. But look, he's gone back to Brazil, and everyone's going, yeah, the standard in Brazil is nowhere near as good. But he's gone back there and he's performing incredibly well, goals, assists at Atletico Mineiro. And he's just shown like there was something there for Forest, really. It was just, look, all the circumstances were negative and didn't go with what he wanted. And he just sort of went with it because he wanted to prove himself in Europe. And I feel if it was Forest's second season in the Premier League, maybe Cooper had moved on and Nuno could have had a look at him, just from a player to bring on for 20, 25 minutes in that central attacking midfield role, to be able to switch the play, find players in between defences, help get the midfield forward, attacking set pieces, which Forest have been terrible at ever since we got promoted. I can't even remember a time over the last 10 years where Forest were any good at set pieces, to be honest with you, but particularly in the Premier League, I think he would have been such a good option to have. And everyone saw who he was with his personality, and he was just himself when he came across to the club, and it was infectious to see, to be honest with you. And in amongst a season of, well, I think both seasons have been turmoil too, in a completely different way. But the first season of, are we going to stay up, not winning many games, so many injuries, he was sort of like a shining light, really, and with his personality. And I think the Forest media took advantage of that and trying to make it a bit more positive than what it was. But everything was against him, and he was just set up to fail. And it was really sad to see, but it's great to see him go back to Brazil from a personal point of view and go back to what he's doing. And he has a real opportunity to win titles with Mineiro, and I really hope he does. I know a lot of Forest fans will probably disagree with what I said in terms of Scarpa, and a lot of people were just like, well, he wasn't good enough and he wasn't strong enough. I would kindly disagree. I don't think he got a fair chance, to be honest with you. We will never know, will we? But I think I have to fight his corner, really, a little bit, just because of exactly what did go behind the scenes, which I don't think people were particularly aware of.
Right, let's move on to the players you put out there on Twitter, and some of these were on the list already, or Carlos Miguel was, that Forest has been linked with, but I picked out 4 to throw at Nathan to get his thoughts on them as potential signs for Forest. I think this will work around the graphic, just about, yeah. So the first of them is Carlos Miguel, Nathan, the Corinthians goalkeeper, who it looks like is going to sign for us. I put in the bit of the bio here. He's 25. The fee's roughly 4 million. I've put 6'8" is very tall, because that's what people have latched onto. But I'm sure there's much more to him than that. So can you tell us a bit about him and a bit about his potential at Forest?
Yeah, I think because he's 25 and he's played very limited first team football, that does concern people. And it is a minor red flag. He has been highly regarded at Corinthians. But with Brazilian football and what the Brazilian journalists sort of told me when I spoke to him, just to sort of back up my thoughts in terms of, in Brazil, if you have a cult hero who plays in a certain position, they sort of play there until their knees go or they want to retire, to be honest. And Corinthians have had a goalkeeper called Cassio for the last 10 to 12 years now, and he's had over 700 appearances. And in the last sort of 6 months or so, like, he's not been performing as well, and rumoured that he wanted to be on his way out. So as soon as that happened, Carlos Miguel got his opportunity. And you can look at it saying he's only played 10, 12 games really in the last year or two, to be honest with you. He's really just sort of bided his time with Corinthians for whatever particular reason. But he's come in and he's actually done a pretty good job, to be honest with you. There's pros and negatives, which I'll dive into. And the pro being 6'8". I think people have been worried about that because they've instantly gone, well, Pantilimon couldn't get down. Now, I watched Corinthians last night against Atletico at Gio, and he pulled off one ridiculous save, which I put on Twitter straight away, which just to show his reflexes. So in and around the box with his saves and his ability to bounce and get back up is actually really impressive, especially for being 6'8". I think that's something to bring up because people just think, well, how on earth does he get down? He feels the goal, but is he agile enough to actually bounce back? And he has that ability in his locker. He's obviously incredibly tall, so from catching crosses, there's no problem at all. Set pieces is the obvious question, and there is a little bit of a red flag from what I have seen. Whether it'll be stamped out or not, I'm not sure. He's a puncher, and obviously being 6'8", and when you stick your hand out, no one's going to be able to get that. But there's never really the calmness to go and collect it. And for 6 for 8, it is a little bit worrying from what I've seen. And it is a small sample size. We are going off 8 Brazilian games and 4 in the Sudamericana. But in crowded areas and against the bigger teams, he's been known to punch from set pieces and hasn't made any errors from that, which have led to goals. But I winced a little bit because I knew exactly what Forest fans would want to hear. They want someone calm and composed in goal after what's happened over the last 12 months or so. The only other negative I really have is he's very good with both feet, to be honest with you, but he knows it. And when he has time on the ball, like he's been caught out a few times. Now he's got away with it in Brazil. He wouldn't get away with it in the Premier League. And look what happened with Matt Turner, okay, and then the way that people turned on him. So that would be a cause for concern. He needs to sort of, it's a bit Bryce Samba-esque in terms of how he was relaxed too much and a bit too cocky sometimes in his ability, and that often got him into one or two sort of sticky situations, we'll put it. And Miguel's slightly different. However, a huge tick is his distribution out of his hands, whether throwing it, whether kicking it. He's really quick to release it. And Forest, obviously, as you know, over the last season or two, have played counter-attacking football in the Premier League, looking to set the wingers off and break and make sure that it's almost 4 Forest players on the opposing 3. And Miguel can not only throw it really far, but he can kick it with accuracy and pace as well. So he's not lofting these balls. So that side of his distribution is great. And he can kick it with his left and right. He is really capable, again, which is a huge tick for a goalkeeper. But when he dawdles on the ball or just gets a little bit too cocky, that's when errors creep in. It is a red flag, but it's something which could easily be stamped out by the manager or the coaching staff. So it wouldn't be something which is not fixable. And yeah, you say he's 25, but he's still young for a goalkeeper. I'm still not convinced as to whether he's going to come in and be the number 1 goalkeeper. I read reports saying like he wants to come and challenge. Well, as a goalkeeper, when you're starting for any club, apart from if you're Scott Carson, you're probably going to go into a club and be like, well, I want the number 1 shirt. No one goes there really to settle unless you go into, like I said, with Man City for a 3rd choice keeper. But all the reports are going to be, well, Miguel wants to go and earn the first team shirt if he's moving to the Premier League. He's not going to say, well, I'm happy to go and sit on the bench. So I take that with a pinch of salt. I'm still not 100% sure whether he would go in and challenge Sells. It'll be interesting to see. But again, 3-4 million is a ridiculously low fee. It's a calculated risk. But look, a lot of Brazilian contacts of mine and people I've spoken to, I've only had good things to say about him. And he's almost been waiting for his opportunity. And it's come 2 or 3 years later than what he'd planned. But moving across to the Premier League, yes, it's a huge sort of jump from where he's been. But there's every chance he could settle in. So it's one I'm definitely intrigued by. There's pros and cons to it. But for 3 or 4 million, again, if I go back to sort of the Joe Worrell comparison, you're not going to get any goalkeeper proven in Europe or England or the Championship for 3 or 4 million, are you, of this sort of age or younger? So I think the club have probably plucked out somebody who I never thought would be interested in moving, considering he's just burst onto the scene. Well, I say burst onto the scene, as in like he's just been given his opportunity this season. He's had to wait ages for Corinthians, and then he's almost turned around and really upset a lot of their fans by going, actually, I'm going to leave after patiently waiting 2 or 3 seasons to get this opportunity. But I suppose he's probably looking at it like, I might not get an opportunity to go to the Premier League again. And look, again, Forest are building a nice community of South American players and maybe wants to be part of that project. And when I spoke to the Brazilian journalist, he did say to me that he's spoken to players like Murillo. And even if Murillo isn't there, he's probably sold the club in a way. And obviously he can just reflect on his 12 months to be like, look how much I've progressed and who's now interested in me and everything else behind the scenes about the club. And that's been, do you know what, if Murillo parts with that and help bring in another player, then that's another tick for Murillo, isn't it? So more positive than negatives, but I think it's important just to flag what I have seen in the early stages of this season.
The other player that kind of the most engaged Forest fans will know about, who's been linked to us already, is Vitao. I must admit I'd not heard of him until this week, but I'm sure you can tell us a bit more about him. 24 years old, plays for Shakhtar, but he's been on loan at Internacional, and he's been linked with West Ham and who was the other club I saw? It was a European club, and it's escaped me now. But tell us a little bit about him and the kind of level he's at compared to Murillo. I guess you've hinted at that already.
Yeah, I'd say he's a level or two below Murillo, maybe a level and a half. We'll go with that. I'll find some middle ground. Right centre back who acts as like an anchor in the defence, really can spray a ball, likes to play with his feet. He's fast, like does tick a lot of boxes, to be honest with you. I've probably jumped onto this podcast at the wrong time because I did spend last evening going through. They got to the semi-finals of the Libertadores last campaign, but I made the mistake of going through every single goal International conceded en route to the semi-final, and there was a couple of cause for concern in terms of just sometimes he dives in a little bit or like steps up trying to win a ball where like he's not always been at the advantage to win it. He did switch off at one set piece where I know Forest fans, as soon as I said that, are going to start panicking, but they got to the semi-finals and they've played an awful lot of games to get there. So maybe I'm being ultra critical. There's parts of his game there defensively where it was just, I think he reads the game well and his pace gets him out of bother a little bit, but where he jumps in a little bit, I think that if he was to continue doing that in the Premier League, he'd be found out. So it's a bit like Miguel. There's a couple of areas there which immediately, if you made a mistake or two, that would need to be rectified. But there are a lot of positives to him. He can read the game exceptionally well at times, especially when he's in play and watching the game unfold in front of him. It's only when there's a team sort of attacking in danger areas and like a teammate of his has made a mistake and he's almost having to cover. So maybe that's where I'm being ultra critical. But I think it's good to have a balanced argument rather than me saying, oh yeah, well look, it's YouTube compilations, so this, and this. There are a few negatives to his game, hence why he's 24 and like not been picked up like Murillo at a younger age. Yes, he has Champions League and Europa League experience with Shakhtar, but he joined an exciting project with International. So they got to the semi-finals, the Libertadores last year, didn't qualify for it this year, which was a huge sort of shock for them, to be honest with you. But with the Brazilian league, it's difficult because clubs in Brazil play every 3-4 days and all the flying and everything is so hectic, and they prioritize the Copa de Brazil because you get more money for winning the cup than you do the league. The Libertadores and the stature of that, people want that over the league. So sometimes the league is sacrificed a little bit, and by the time you've got knocked out, it's hard to sort of rectify your position. But International have invested a lot of money over the last 18 months, and Vital has pretty much been built around that defense with him being in on loan at the moment. But he has been a key part of that, and there's been a lot of transitions, but he has very much remained as the sort of number one centre-back within that squad, and that's because he can pick a pass, he can bring the ball forward, he is pacey, he's got a slender build. If I'm going to go back to that debate of is he going to be strong enough, and people have dived into his statistics for aerial duels. Well, his aerial duels over the last 12 months is higher than Murillo's, which I think I may have flagged earlier in the podcast, if we're going to try and put any of those rumours to bed. But he's good at attacking set pieces as well, which I think Forest have heavily relied on maybe Willy Bolly to score a couple of goals and really lacked a threat from a defensive point of view when it comes to corners and set pieces and stuff. So he does offer that threat in front of goal, and he can provide it at the other end of the pitch as well. Has had those moments where he has switched off time a few occasions. Maybe that's why it hasn't worked out on Shakhtar. I don't think he was a flop there with, look, think about the war and everything which has been going on there, and probably why he's gone back and joined the Brazilian project, and an exciting one, to be honest with you. So there's a lot of positives. I do like the profile. I think the rumours fee may be a little bit less than what's on the screen. I think anything in around 5 million is again, Joe Worrell's around the same fee, and I think I'd rather be signing Vital and Joe Worrell be on the way out if we're going to do a sort of straight swap in terms of finances. And I know it's important to have sort of not an unborn bred players in your team and all that, but for me, Vital, that sort of price, I think it's definitely worth a calculated risk. And West Ham have been spending a lot of time in Brazil over the last couple of months, and they are eager to spend money in that market. So I'm not sure on that third club who you said were linked. I've only seen West Ham and Forest, but the fact that another Premier League club are looking to potentially replace Kurt Zuma with Vital, someone who is tall and is able to play out from the back, is a huge positive. So yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I do like his profile. There's just a couple of things in there which may be a little bit found out in the Premier League if he doesn't adjust straight away.
I'll have a look for that third club because that's going to annoy me if I can't remember it. But it was a European club, and I was sort of, while you talk about the next player, I will Google that. To my shame, the transfer fee is taken from Transfer Markt as a player evaluation, which they are wildly inaccurate on almost every player. So that one's on.
I think it's around about 4 or 5 million. So it's not a million miles off.
That's good. That's good to know. Right, the next one. The last two are just for a bit of fun. That I know Nathan's picked out a couple of talented players that might fit what Forest are looking for. The first one I picked out from his list on Twitter is Santiago Heze. I picked him out because he plays for Olympiacos, so it's a much more viable deal to do if we want to do it. A 22-year-old defensive midfielder. Again, the valuation is taken from transfer marks. So take that with a pinch of salt on screen as 8 million, but he was a key cog in their Europa Conference win. What is it that you like about him as a player then, Nathan?
Yeah, I will reiterate, I'm not a scout. I don't have any inside knowledge, but I put about 12 player profiles I do like. But Santiago Heze, look, maybe it is a viable link with that Olympiacos, which is maybe why I put him in. But we were talking about him on a couple of podcasts while he was in Argentina at Huracan, a team who were pretty poor, to be honest with you. But he was acting as a number 6, but one in which was able to take the game by the scruff of its neck and advance up the pitch. And another one who's not going to get you goals and assists, almost the assist before the assist, but just a real workhorse who will do the work not many players want to do in behind before releasing your wingers or your strikers. To be honest with you, you only have to go through his stats throughout not only the Greek league, but how he performed in the Europa Conference League. And he was a huge figure in why Olympiacos surprised many, to be honest with you. And it was such a good pickup from Olympiacos. I was very impressed when they brought him across. I don't think it was much more than a few million, to be honest with you. We've highly praised him on the Copa Club podcast for at least a few months before he even signed. The Olympiacos deal came out of the blue. I think he was originally meant to be going to Belgium. I can't remember who that club was, but that broke down and Olympiacos saw the opportunity and brought him in. And a lot of people probably would have seen him in the Europa Conference, especially in the final. And I just think he's been a brilliant player for them. I think he's tailor-made for the Premier League. A very good number 6. And like I said, all his stats back it up, to be honest with you. And he just does the hard work. A little bit like Dominguez in terms of works really hard, high press, doesn't give people a moment to sort of rest on the ball, but really solid on it as well. And I just feel like he will move across to the Premier League in the next season or so. And look, with that Olympiacos link, it's difficult for Marinakis, isn't it? Because obviously he wants Olympiacos to carry on winning and progressing, but he obviously wants to take Forest to the next level. So maybe this is one he'll park for the time being, but a really solid player. Definitely go and watch him. I'm a huge fan of number 6s, which modern day a lot of people do more sort of steer towards them, and they are increasing in value, putting up the most exciting to watch in terms of wingers and strikers and stuff. But for me, Heze is like the perfect ideal number 6 who I'd love to sit in the middle for Forest.
Last player. Now, this is where you come into your own, because I'll admit that I'd not heard of this player, but I'm sure he's a very big talent and prospect in Brazil. It is Nathan Fernandez, a 19-year-old winger who can also play through the middle, plays for Grêmio. Like a few of these Brazilian players that we've signed, he's got very limited experience. So you're early on the radar for him. Tell us a little bit about him.
Really interesting profile. Operated more as a striker at under 20 level, really calm and composed through the middle, and sort of been given his opportunity at Grêmio this year because Grêmio sold the whole front line over the recent window, and they're giving a lot of their youth minutes. And Nathan Fernandez is one of those, and he's operating more on the left wing, to be honest with you. But he just catches the eye because he's fast, he's strong, he has that skill set really, which makes him dangerous in and around attacking areas. And I think just the physicality of him as well, like it ticks a lot of boxes for European football. And I don't think many people will have eyes on him. There's another winger called Gustavo Nunes who's sort of exploded on the scene at Grêmio, and they're already demanding 20-25 million for him. And he's a wonderful talent. But I think Nathan Fernandez is probably more built for a Premier League move long term, to be honest with you, like very limited minutes. And obviously, I think I touched upon it at the start of the podcast with Internacional. There's a lot of flooding in the south of Brazil at the moment, which has really impacted Grêmio. So we haven't been able to see Nathan Fernandez as much as what we'd liked. Fortunately, Grêmio are back playing, and Nathan Fernandez will play a key part of that. So look, one to monitor. Look, maybe not this season. I think there's a couple of the players on the list who probably are ready to move across to the Premier League. Won't be Fernandez just yet, but a lot of Premier League clubs are buying promise rather than what's actually unfolded, and Nathan Fernandez has that. A lot of them ticks a lot of boxes, and it's just a profile. I'm sort of getting to the point now where you can recognise players who will move across to Europe, not necessarily the Premier League, just from watching them for a few games, to be honest with you, especially when they come through the academy. And I just like that he's versatile in terms of he can finish through the middle, but he's happy to play on the left wing as well. So versatile option, strong, fast, can finish. What more could you possibly want?
Excellent. The club, linked with Vitar as well that I found was Villarreal. So a good.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, good proven La Liga club, certainly. Right, I think we'll leave it there. I have to thank Nathan profusely because he's done so much talking in this. Because my windows have been fitted, which people will know, I've tried to keep these questions short, and finally Nathan's done good long answers as well. So that's worked out very nicely. So thank you for that. If you have enjoyed this, do us a favor, hit like, hit subscribe. You can become a channel member, and lovely iTunes reviews are welcome. And also, like I said at the top of the show, you can get your tickets for our live show tomorrow. Would be great to see as many people as possible. Nathan, thank you very much. We always give people any other business, any final words on this podcast. So anything you want to add or any final plugs for your own stuff, do feel free to throw that in.
Yeah, I'll throw a couple of plugs in for the Copa Club. So a dedicated South American podcast for those who are unaware across Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, where throughout the year we will talk about not only like the Libertadores, Brazilian football, Argentinian football. We do player profiles all year round, but we do so much more when it comes to the transfer window. We're going to be very busy. But we have our latest magazine coming out, which is due to be published end of July, where 50% of it will be reflected on Copa America, but 50% of it will be exclusive interviews with a Fortaleza sporting director, football players, profiling the best players across South America. So ones which don't make it into the podcast, or we're going to go a little bit more in depth. We do full features on that as well. So keep an eye out. That'll be on our website. So yeah, the Copa Club, add it to your list.
We could get into a whole discussion about the evolution of the media, but how come he's still doing print? That's an interesting commercial decision because, you know, I can't, like you find, so I can't imagine it makes you a lot of money. So how come you went with doing print still and not just online?
Honestly, you'd be surprised. Demand. I released the Copa Club issue 1 as a digital magazine for free, which was a Libertadores team guide where we just highlighted young players, key players, managers, tactics, etc. And the bombardment I had for print was crazy. So we ran like a small sample size, pretty much sold out in 24, 48 hours of that. So ever since, we do digital versions as well for people who are like abroad, but people are happy. People want the print copies, which is mad, to be honest with you. We sold out of 3 out of our 4 issues, to be honest with you. The only one we haven't sold out was our Christmas one, where I went a little bit too mad in terms of how many we actually got. But we get big names in it. We interview like the likes of Tim Vickery. He's happy to work with the Copa Club, has done a few times now. So people are buying into the brand, and yeah, people love it, and I'm so grateful for it. It keeps the business afloat. It means that we can, all our podcasts, all our website content is free, so it keeps us going. So if you ever want to support the Copa Club, do pick up a magazine. You won't regret it. It's the only dedicated South American magazine on the market, and it offers a hell of a lot more. Like, there are relationships now between, as we know, with Premier League football and South America. So if you want, it's not just me, it's a team of dedicated experts, pick and choose who comes into the magazine, but people who watch South American football and write really good content. So look, support independent companies like the Copa Club, else I have to go back to full-time work and we can't do interviews like this. So keep me in business and support a really good growing brand.
Yeah, and the same for me. Yeah, because I need to do this to keep in business as well. Yeah, so
Yeah.
And I'll blow some smoke up Nathan's ass because I do have Tim Vickery's contact, but I went to Nathan first because I can tell how good he is at this and how much he knows. So yeah, great to have Nathan on. We shall be back. What day is it? We're back tomorrow with a bit on bottled up blokes and their links to Forest, and just general. It's Men's Mental Health Week, so we'll do a bit on that, and then something on Friday maybe on transfer rumours. I do find transfer rumours exhausting from the whole. You know, how much of them are real, how much of them are quite obviously nonsense. So we'll discuss some of those with a pinch of salt. You must find them absolutely knackering, actually, Nathan.
It's relentless. I can go and have my dinner and come back and I've been tagged in about 100 things. But we normally wait till something's a little bit more legit, or if I've spoken to people who I actually trust before putting any profiles out there, because otherwise I wouldn't be doing anything else. I'd just constantly be tweeting or writing about these links. So I do wait until there's like a legit source, or they're actually, or there's a demand for them. But we're very much a case of play profiles first rather than pretend to particularly know exactly what's going on. We don't want to be that sort of brand, and I don't want to be that person either.
Yeah, same here. Although we don't know what we're talking about the players a lot of the time either. It's all a lot of fun. Right, we'll leave it there. Great to have Nathan with us for the last hour or so. Do join us tomorrow if you can. But in the meantime, have a good day, and we shall see you soon.